All right, so we will get started. Thanks to everyone for coming.
Come on in.
And today for our training, we're going to start here in the Wonder Cabinet, an amazing exhibit curated by Bronwyn. And then we're going to move over into the Collector's Circle 15 exhibit. So we'll get started.
Wow. Hello, everybody. Let's see. Hopefully you were able to, a really long time ago, maybe read, I wrote a little tiny one-page thing in the Call of the Wild, so go back and refer to that if you would like to. We turned some of that into these 4 labels that are in here that help describe the exhibit. Let's see. So Adam and I have been talking about Wonder Cabinets for a really long time, and about maybe a year ago, Amy made the connection that it would be really cool to do a Wonder Cabinet along with the Darwin exhibit. So that was very conscious in trying to think about this room in terms of going along with how artists are inspired by nature or use it or that sort of thing. So would everybody like me to do a little 2-minute thing on what a Wonder Cabinet is?
Yes.
Or do you? Okay. So a Wonder Cabinet or a Wunderkammer or a Cabinet of Curiosities or there's a bunch of other names that go along with it, was originally a room in a private home or multiple rooms in a private home around the time of the Renaissance, give or take some, where very wealthy men would collect objects from their travels around the world and from other places, and they often started off with sort of three-ish branches, a natural history component, sort of objects that were like very interesting and strange from the natural world, scientific, these sort of like height of whatever scientific period, whatever was going on in that period of time in science, and then also sort of artifacts from other cultures. So for example, there might be. Does anybody know on a telescope that happened way before, right? I don't know. So there might be a telescope. Yeah. So there might be a telescope and a really big weird shell and an African mask, all in the same shelf, crammed in together. So this was before we, as humans and culturally, started separating all of these things into what we know of now as how we classify, like, that's a natural history museum, this is an art museum, this is a science museum. So it, sort of before we started making things into big groups, things were kind of classified in a way that the person in the house wanted to put them together. Some people think that Wonder Cabinets were sort of the precursor to the museum. So a lot of these private collections turned into public places where people could come and look at objects. So that's sort of the little what a Wonder Cabinet is. Lots of people have created and been obsessed with and made Wonder Cabinets over the years. There are lots of artists who have done things with them. This iteration has sort of three groups that we drew from for objects. We invited some artists to create art objects that would possibly be in a Wonder Cabinet. We collected objects from natural history objects from people's homes in the valley. Many of you contributed to it. And then we also mined the permanent collection for objects that may not ever get out another way or could be used in this way once and maybe used another way in another exhibit another time. Let's see, what else? What am I forgetting? Any of you have heard me do this over. There will, as you can see now, there are little tags with numbers next to objects, and that just means that I haven't got around to making a key yet, but there will be a key. There will be like a little book that you'll be able to go, oh, what's that number? And you'll be able to look up what that object is, whether it's a a found object, a natural history object, or an artist-made piece. So if you'd like, we could go around and talk about some of your most curious or favorite objects, or however you'd like to do that. One example that I'd like to give just right at the end is that we have a Ripley's in town, and that is sort of like the other crazy end of what a cabinet is a lot of like shrunken heads and weird collections of belt buckles and I don't know stuff like that. So yeah, if you'd like, we can talk about certain objects. You can talk about why it's your favorite thing in here, or however you'd like to do it, we can do that.
Or people who donated things can tell us about your object.
Yeah.
Because I bet there are some here.
This. In the glass.
So this is a labeling activity. So you could, if you wanted to, get a little pencil and make a little label for, we had the intention that you would make a label for these three objects, but people are doing a really fun job labeling other things in this room. I think there's one kid that did it last week that did a really good job. So the label says, label it yourself. ID the object. What is it? Where was it discovered? Use your imagination. Significance of the piece. Why is it important? So you, as a guest to this exhibit, can participate, and Amy wants to read one.
Look, yeah, so I would bet a kid did this. A skull, national park, because it's of a dead animal.
I like the one right by you with the glass.
The Yeti foot?
Yeah.
Yes, this is a Yeti footprint, and it was found at Camp Lake in the Wind River Range, and it's rare evidence of the Wyoming Yeti, which is also a Bigfoot. So that is a good example of either visitor-invented information or artist-invented information. So the artist objects in here could be questionable or not. It has, some of them look pretty obvious, and other ones maybe not so much.
So we should add that one is also known as a grizzly track.
Yes.
So we were just thinking that they would maybe put the labels in here, but it's not. As always with visitor experience, it's very different than what we imagined.
But that nice little kid last week said that this is a cup that is in a house that people drink from.
Right.
And that's okay too.
That's okay.
And that is a very curious artifact.
Somebody's practicing their imagination and their writing skills.
Exactly.
Right. Hey, Bronwyn.
Yes.
What is this thing on the top left?
So this crazy giant thing is a seed pod from the Seychelles.
Oh.
And this is a tree or a plant that only grows there. And so Nancy McCarthy, who's a volunteer, lent that to us for this exhibit.
Okay, so I just overheard, Rob, I wish they were labels.
Yeah.
Can you please speak about why they're not labels?
So we went around about that, Bobby, and there will be the key that you'll be able to look at, but I think if you look around, or at least to me, as I looked around and we put this room together last week, the absence of words, I think, makes it more magical. So then you actually have to look at the objects and be really curious about them and refer to things that maybe you've seen before, or things that, or really use your looking skills and thinking about some artist-made object. So, yes.
Do you think it's also more authentic?
Probably,
an original.
maybe. I think probably the rooms that were, I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume that the things that were in people's rooms originally in their homes, it was like the person led the tour. So you would go in there with them if you were over to dinner at their house, and they would wander around and be like, and look at this cool thing, and they would tell you about it. So that's how I would assume it would be. So maybe it would be more like that, but I think that, so Bobby, there will be explanation, but you'll have to look at it yourself not have a bunch of words right next to each object, because I think it would make it, I think it would make it visually messy.
One of the comments left last week through the observation evaluation during mixed media was a person who had just been in Europe at a similar exhibit, I think in the Prado in Spain. They've done a similar version of this to complement some parts of their permanent collection. And that comment left was, no labels, please. The European version of this does not have labels.
Well, and one connection, back to the trainings that Andrew led this summer, this could be a really great exhibit to practice that, what do you see? What, encourage the visitors to create their own stories, and kind of that concept that we're here for a lot more than just, giving them a bunch of facts and background about it. So this is a really fun exhibit to explore that technique with.
So as I'm looking around, those of you that are so, familiar with our collection, a really fun fact is that the 3 mounts that are on the back wall all came from Bob Kuhn's studio. So that is really fun. That's a really, really great way for us to be able to use things that are materials that came with things that Bob Kuhn used and had daily in his studio.
His Wunderkammer.
What?
His Wunderkammer.
Yes, exactly.
Could you elaborate on any links between this, and you said you purposely kind of chose to do it with Darwin. Could you elaborate on that?
Do you have any that come right to mind?
No.
No. Okay.
That's why I'm asking you.
So that exhibit it has some contemporary works and some historical works in it. And what we're trying to do with those 2 rooms is show how different artists have been inspired or led through their artistic path, career, by science or specific scientists. So by showing scientific objects, or not scientific but natural history type objects, we might be able to, draw that out of people. And then also with the artists who have made work in here, they're also doing that in a certain way, but just a little bit different, in a different way than what's happening in there. But I didn't look it up, but I would probably guess that Darwin had a pretty good collection of stuff.
I'm sure that's true.
So,
because that was part of his journeys to the other continents, was to collect stuff and bring it back and examine it and look for evidence of his theory of evolution. And then Alfred Russel Wallace, who is the parallel to Darwin, he's mentioned in one of the brochures in there on the wall. And there is, in fact, even at the end of that brochure, a picture from his Wonder Cabinet. So he had one, as Bronwyn said, they probably all had them.
Who is the, oh shoot, there's a picture in my one book that I have, but who's the one of those real famous surrealists, Carl Andre? Or I forget who, but the surrealists had all kinds of collections of strange objects. I can show you guys later if you want. So
That's why the
part of
Prado was doing it. They made it a connection to part of their surrealist gallery. Was to show people in their paintings and sculptures that Breton and all of them
that's what it is.
had
It's Breton.
really weird Wonder Cabinets.
Yep. So, also what I think is really interesting is how many of you guys collect things? What do you collect, Mark?
Stuff.
Yeah. Similar
Cool
kinds
rocks
of things?
that I
or-
find on the, kayaking or hiking or, I don't take them from the park, of course. Feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff. Shells, I get a lot of the shells.
What else do people collect?
Things like this, if I find them, which is rare, but I do have a few things.
Yeah.
Processing stuff.
Beanie Babies.
See? That's good.
Beanie Babies.
Adam
And they're worth nothing.
Adam collects old movie projectors, and here is one.
That was that.
Wow. I collect pieces of wood. Inside and out.
Yeah. My dad can't go past any rocks without picking up one of them.
Yeah. I'm always trying to take something out of the park and my family won't let me. I know, but I find it.
Unless you're consuming it on the spot, it's okay.
So that is the other interesting thing. As I was going around finding people that might have something interesting, everybody collects something. I mean, pretty much. And even if it's like you only have 3 of that thing, that's a collection. So I don't know, it's just interesting, our like human need to like amass things and keep them. One of the people who lent a lot of things to this exhibit, Marc Nolan, his collection is, he thinks about it in terms of a trigger for his memory. So his objects all have some kind of really personal memory that go along with them, so that when he walks around his house, he sees this certain thing, and it reminds him of whatever it is. So there's, there's a whole bunch of different reasons too why we collect things, like trying to, remember. We might like something because it's really cool looking, but we also might be trying to remember a really awesome day when we were with certain people, or that kind of thing.
I will build a Pages document. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but remember in the summer I built Pages documents on the iPad, and then I can send them to you and we'll post it on the wiki. I will build one for each of these exhibits, and I have started to collect images of Darwin's house and other examples of wonder cabinets, those kinds of things, so that you'd have that as a resource for yourself.
Did you talk about the high one of them?
Yes, that is that's actually part of our permanent collection. It's a piece of burl wood that Leo Osborne carved and stained into the abstract-ish shape of a bison.
We did that when he was an artist in residence.
Oh,
really?
He made it here and just left it with us.
It's gorgeous. He's the guy with the imagination.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the big sculpture, the new one.
Could you talk, Bronwyn, in case some of our volunteers get questions from visitors about the elephant tusks?
Yes. So if everybody would turn around and look at either of these elephant tusks that are here, flanking that side of the room. Those are newly part of the permanent collection. They were given to us a couple of years ago, and people might have, or you might have questions about ivory. Are we allowed to have it? What's going on with the illegal ivory trade and all of those kinds of questions. And these tusks were from an elephant that was shot legally in the 70s. So we are allowed to have them, and we accepted them into the collection on the basis that we use them for educational purposes, although they've come into the cabinet first before. So that is the story behind those 2 tusks.
I had no idea they were that big.
Yes. And I think it's really interesting to think, we haven't really announced it yet, but we're thinking about having an exhibit next fall that centers around the killing and illegal trade of animals. And one story I heard last week is really interesting, in that the Chinese word for, who was there with me? I might be getting this wrong. The Chinese word for tusk is the same thing as tooth, and so it doesn't occur to them that an animal would have to be killed to get the tooth, because we just normally lose them or pull them or that sort of thing. So there's am I getting this wrong? Has anybody? So that is, I think, a really interesting thing to think about in terms of different cultures and how we, words mean different things and that sort of thing. Does anybody have a cool object they want to talk about? Or ask about?
Are you still collecting things, or you done?
If it's a rock, I will collect it. But if it's something else that has organic material, it has to be treated for 28 days in a no oxygen situation. So if you had a cool rock that you had a fun story about that wasn't too big, I would love to have it in this exhibit. It's open till the middle of April.
So when the wasp nests, those are the real deals, and these are the artist's interpretation. Did I get that right?
So yes, those are real, and there's lots of parts of wasps over there, and a piece of honeycomb, and some real wasps, and an artist-made thing that is a bee bison, otherwise known as a bison. And these are actually, when I get the interpretation out, these are an artist made, 3 objects made by artists, and they're eggs actually that have cracked open, but they've been made with wasp parts. So that's why they're over in the egg section. This is a real dinosaur egg and a real emu egg.
Oh, will you talk maybe just a little bit about the groupings that you all kind of had in mind?
Yes. As Adam and I were putting this together, things sort of gravitated to each other, but they've also moved around a little bit, and we sort of have continued to move things around a little bit, so it might be evolving. But, you know, we have some fossils over here, and fossilized wood, and sort of an egg section, and a seed and nut section, and some bugs, and some really cool giant acorns made by an artist. And then we've got more rocks and ocean type things, and more really cool artist-made things. And then as you go around the room, we sort of have a bug wood section. Then we have a lot of skulls. We have a little bit of a man-made area there in the middle, so some objects that have animal parts are made out of them. There's a neat, underneath all of the mounts, there's a sort of a map section. Right behind Bobby, there's a artist-made piece that is a planned community for wasps. And then more skulls. We've got dinosaur bones.
And those birds in the tubes. Ew.
That's how you. Those are educational pieces that are part of the museum education collection, and they're called skins, and that's how you study and look at those birds. And then some more some human-made fossils and shell things, and some other oddities over there. Giant horse hoof. And then more things up on top.
I have an item, I don't really know what it is, and if anybody does, for sure, since you're standing so close to it, it's this vertebrae that I picked up while I was out elk hunting, and I think it's from a cow, I think it's bovine, but I watched the carcass get eaten over at least a 3 or 4 year period of time, and so when this was the last piece left, I thought, I'm going to take that and see if Bronwyn has an interest in it. But I think it's bovine, a bovine vertebrae. So if anybody knows, that'd be great. Take a look, tell me.